So with McLaren, you're working with DC. I was on the other side of the garage with Kimmy for a lot of that time, but you also worked with a number of other drivers. Let's just tick off some of those that you worked with.
Yeah, so I worked with Juan Pablo Montoya, who came in to replace DC when DC left to go to Red Bull. I worked with Pedro De La Rosa, who stepped in for Juan Pablo when he went to NASCAR. Alonso. So that was an interesting point in my career. That was a real...
Hi, I'm Mark Priestley. I spent 10 years working at the McLaren Formula One team with the likes of Lewis Hamilton, Kimi Raikkonen, Fernando Alonso, Mika Hakkinen. But those are just the drivers. I also worked with amazing people behind the scenes. Adrian Newey, Ron Dennis. They all taught me valuable lessons that I now know are not just applicable to Formula One. My mission with this podcast is to help you to think more like a Formula One team might think about the challenges you might face in life, on a personal level, on a business level, being a parent, social challenges that you face. I hope you'll take away some valuable lessons that will help you on your own journey towards high performance. Welcome to Pitlane Life Lessons. In this week's episode, I'm talking to mindset and performance coach Gerry Convy. Gerry has the most amazing backstory on his way to Formula One, where he worked with a number of elite drivers and athletes. But before that, he also became a multiple black belt in martial arts. He got into the Royal Navy, but that wasn't enough for him. He also wanted to get into the Marines and did so. All of these things have created an incredible level of mental toughness that he now passes on to the drivers and teams that he works with. But in this episode, there are a number of practical tips that will help you get to the change in your life that you're striving for by following Gerry's advice. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Gerry, let's start today and work back with a little bio of who you are. So, I know it because we've been friends for a long time, but you're working in motorsport today. Just give everybody a little overview of what you do, who you work with, what you do for them, and let's go from there all the way back through your journey.
Okay. So currently I'm working in World Endurance Championships. So I'm working with Corvette, a company called TF that run the program for Corvette racing. And in GTs, and I really enjoy that. I'm working with the pit crew, working with the drivers, working with the whole team, basically giving them advice on how to look after themselves, training programs, nutrition, travel. So yeah, the whole gambit really.
Yeah.
And when I was last year, it was my second year fully in WEC, and I was working with Cadillac Racing last year.
That's the World Endurance Championship.
That's the World Endurance Championship, yeah. And so that was in hypercar last year with Cadillac. That was a good experience, and that gave me a good platform because it's still within the GM group to work with Corvette this year.
And then before that, so I met you first in Formula One. So we worked together at McLaren. You worked with a number of great drivers from McLaren and elsewhere. So let's go through your F1 period of the journey.
Sure. So I was actually late to the program. I came in at 36, and my first step into Formula One was with David Coulthard with McLaren, and where we met. And it was before I was working with Jackie Stewart, and that gave me a great platform to go into motorsport, because it was a unique opportunity to see it through the eyes of a world champion and a team owner.
What were you doing for Jackie?
I was his personal trainer for 3 years.
Yeah.
So I just traveled around with him, and he was 60 at the time, close to what I am now. And he wanted I remember his team Stewart Grand Prix at the time, I think they just got a podium, and I think it was Nürburgring. And he saw a picture of himself and he didn't like it on the podium with champagne. Yeah, exactly. So it's always a good motivation. And he decided he wanted to get in shape. So he put feelers out for trainers, and 9 of us went for it. I got the job, luckily enough, and started from there and lived at his place. And again, another unique perspective, because I got to see it through, like I say, a world champion's team owner's eyes, a legend in the sport, as you know. And he's still around in the paddock, isn't he?
Still a legend.
He's still a legend, exactly, always will be. And yeah, because I think if he didn't do it, I think he just needs to do it. It's just in his DNA, and he loves people. He loves meeting people. He loves, admittedly, said to me that he loves being famous, because he just loves it. And that was great. Somebody admits it, because a lot of people don't want to admit it, but there's a lot of perks to it, and he acknowledges that.
So from there you get the job at McLaren, working with DC.
Yeah.
And then, so that introduces an element of real competition. So you go from being a personal trainer just to sort of accomplish personal goals, to being part of a bigger team, working with an elite athlete. Must have been big differences there, right?
Yeah, there was. I mean, Jackie gave me Sir Jackie gave me a step into it with some of his Formula 3 drivers, and that was a good foothold into it. When it was Paul Stewart Racing, and then I went into the F1. But that was only for about a year. But the F1 was a completely different thing. But I'm a person who, at that point, I was looking at two avenues, because I was getting to the point where I wanted to go into more of a high-profile challenging. Not that the working with Jackie Stewart wasn't a high-profile challenging thing, but I wanted a full-time role where I wanted that. And I was looking at going into movies and training people for, on the aesthetic side and in fight scenes.
Yeah, okay.
And Formula One, because I was talking to Mark at the time, Mark Arnold, our mutual friend, who you had on the podcast not long ago, and so I was going between those two avenues, and I just missed out on a role on the James Bond movie. I was supposed to be training Halle Berry, and then at the last minute, the production, there was a bit of a communication thing, as it happens in big companies and big productions all over the world. There was a miscommunication between the stunt department who brought me in and the production department, and they panicked, the production department, thinking they hadn't got a trainer for Halle Berry. So called up the guy who'd worked on the previous movie, and that was it. So they didn't know, so they already brought the guy in, so that was it. It was too late. So, and then about a month later, the Formula One thing came up with DC. So it was a great, both the things I was going for, it was like a sliding doors moment.
Yeah, how different it might have been, eh?
Yeah, no, exactly, So, yeah.
So with McLaren, you're working with DC. I was on the other side of the garage with Kimmy for a lot of that time, but you also worked with a number of other drivers. Let's just tick off some of those that you worked with during your time in F1.
Yeah, so I worked with Juan Pablo Montoya, who came in to replace DC when DC left to go to Red Bull. And then after that, I worked with Pedro de la Rosa, who stepped in for Juan Pablo when he went to NASCAR. And then Alonso. So that was an interesting point in my career. That was probably, I never had the easy road, let's put it that way, but I don't think I'm designed for the easy road, and I welcome the burden. You can only do it for so long, but I like I like the challenge, and I like the adversity it picks me more than me picking it.
Well, that is something that I really want to explore. We'll come back to your Formula One days, but let's go prior to Formula One. So you're going backwards in this journey. So before Sir Jackie Stewart, before this idea of trying to break into movies, let's go way back, because I know you had some military experience as well, and that must have been crucial in being formative for you.
Yeah, I was never out to have a career in the military. I was out to have an experience, and I'm all about experiences in life. Even today at 58 years of age, I'm always looking at something that will challenge me and excite me. Yeah. And there's always something out there. And even back in those days when I was a teenager, I thought, I was never, even at school, I was a sportsman, but I never visualized myself as a soldier, or I went to the Navy first because I didn't really know much about the military as such. So I went to the Navy, but then I saw the Marines training and I thought, I want a piece of that because that looks tougher. So I went in, no disrespect to the Navy, because I had a good time in there, and I was on ships and stuff, and I had a great experience. But for me, I liked the physical side, and I was really quite a high testosterone person, and I really saw these guys as, the elite. Yeah, and I wanted to be part of that and to challenge myself.
So the Navy training, presumably, is pretty tough anyway. So they're trying to break you at some point, and you've gone through that. You survived it. You've presumably excelled. You see another challenge in the Marines, which is clearly going to try and really break you to another level altogether. But that's exciting to you.
Yeah, and I think that the Navy. I think in my mind's eye, I visualized it differently. But when I got there, there was some crucial elements of fitness there and stuff like that. But I was really into looking at myself. I'd really prepared myself. And so mentally, physically, I was really ready for it. But when I saw the Marines, I never think in life you should go for the easy option or the obvious option. Yeah. I think it's nice to test yourself in life and to be excited, because you're only here for a visit at the end of the day,
That's true.
And I'm near the end and the beginning. Then I was near the beginning and the end. But I just wanted to do it. I just wanted to do it. And it was, I like high performance, and I always have done. And
where do you think that came from? Prior to launching into this sort of military career, what was it that was driving you for this? Were you chasing an adrenaline rush? Were you chasing this constant test? What was it that you think that was either pulling you towards it or pushing you towards it?
I was a decent footballer when I was younger. And I was captain my team, and I was in leadership roles and stuff like that, even back when I was a kid. But I don't know. I can't even understand where it came from. But I always admired coaches, and always admired people who strove to do the best they could. I was a big Kenny Dalglish was my hero when I was a kid. I used to go and watch him when he was at Celtic and then Liverpool, and he was somebody I really looked up to, as a figure, as a person, not just as a sportsman. But people like that, and I don't know. I think I had an innate feeling when I was brought up in a culture of not people didn't travel back in those days, and back in the 70s where I was growing up, which is obviously a long time ago. But we did. I lived in the Middle East for 6 years when I was a kid. I was always a new kid up until I was about 12 in schools. I went to 5-6 different schools, lived in many different houses, lived in different cultures. And that gave me a real good grounding in life. And so I saw a lot of good people, a lot of famous people came over from the sporting world, came to the Middle East, even back in those days. I know that we've got Qatar and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia now in motorsport and boxing and UFC, etc. But even back in those days, Pele was there. I saw Pele play. Brian Clough brought his Nottingham Forest team to come over, and then they ended up winning the European Cup the year after, and Puskas and all these different people came over, all these top people.
Yeah.
So I'd sort of had a kind of innate feeling of being around these guys and soaking up what they offered even at a young age, I think.
And did you have any clue of what these people had to be able to get to the top? Seeing elite athletes or elite performers, I'm not sure yet whether there was a connection back then of seeing the Dalglishes of this world and anyone else, and then you ending up in a career where you're helping athletes like this. But was there something that you saw in all of them that was a common trait, do you reckon?
Yeah, I think just the way they handled themselves. There was a commonality in the way they moved, the way they operated as people. There was just a confidence there, a quiet confidence. Especially with Kenny, for example. I met him about 10 years ago. I was with another racing driver, Jamie Green. I remember in Amsterdam, and I'd never met him personally before, and it like made my day, to meet him. But he was just so laid back and chilled, and not, he's still Sir Kenny Dalglish even then. So I just think that when you meet people like that and they don't disappoint you, and they're high performance people. And even then when I went on to, again, they prepared me for when I went on to work with Sir Jackie later on. Yeah. Because I'd met a lot of famous people, and, I'm not one of these people who genuflects at the fact of somebody because they're famous or rich or anything like that. If somebody's a good person, they're a good person. And that's the way I want to be in life. I don't want to be I'm not for sure rich, but I just want to be the best human being I can be. I always have been. Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. And I think, have you found over the years of working with some of these real high achievers and high performing athletes, particularly, is being a good person a key part of their success, do you think? And, obviously we talk about, the physical agility, the pushing yourself, the training, the mental, we'll get into all of that in a moment, but just being a nice person, how important is that on this journey towards success, do you think?
Well, it's interesting because quite a lot of people, that's the first question that people will say, is he a nice guy? Well, I can honestly say that there were nice guys in the way that most people in normal life say nice. They're good people, and they've got good morals and good, they know how to deal with people. But I think they've got to have a little bit of an edge to them. That's a lot I was saying about, say, Kenny and all those other people. They'll have an edge to them, when they pull on that shirt, or, when they're doing their job, they'll have that edge to them. But it's that ability to turn that around when they're not doing that job, when the driver's not pulled the race helmet on. You've seen it yourself, Mark. It's like, it's a different kettle of fish. Once they get that on, that's them. They're in their world, aren't they?
Yeah.
But when I saw that with Jackie, actually. He was fantastic. He could talk to whether you're cleaning the floors or you're king of the country, and I saw him in the company of very famous people, and I saw him in the company of, people that would say, oh yeah, I remember this and that, and they've got a story, and whether he remembers it or he doesn't remember it, you will say he does, and, make the person feel special, and that's for me, that's a fantastic trait to have,
Yeah, and it's part of this mental switching, isn't it? Which I think is a huge part, which I think we should talk about, because switching mentally what's going on inside your brain is really important in situations like the one you've just described, but also in terms of competing. It must be the same in your military background as well. You have to be able to switch from one mental state to another almost at will when the need arises, which is actually something that's very easy to say, can be quite difficult to do. Did the military training give you some, real step up in that regard? Was that the first time in your life where you were really, I guess, pushed and trained in that respect?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, since then I've done other tough things, but for sure the military is definitely the toughest. And I think anybody who's ever done that, been in that world, will say the same thing, because there's no comparison to it in the world.
Yeah.
Probably sports is, professional sports is probably the next thing, or especially fighting, where you're having to, as in like UFC or some sort of MMA, that kind of thing.
Well, aren't you a multiple black belt in Muay Thai? Or
I've got three black belts, but again, that was again something that I wanted to challenge myself, because once you come out of, say, the military side, again, life seems very sort of, it's a bit of it's like when you come out of F1 at the beginning. I'm sure you felt that as well.
The boredom threshold is up here somewhere, and all of a sudden it drops.
Exactly. And it's I don't know. It's almost like if you look at it like an ECG, it's like our lives are, in motorsports like that, and it's the same in the military as well. Yeah. Whereas in normal life, it's kind of there, and then a little bit of a blip, and then and that's not to put down normal life as such. That's just the way of life. It's just what it is. Because we have to adapt and overcome so much, don't we? And we never know when something's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's the same in the military. Same in a fight, like a physical fight with someone, and whether it's in a ring or whether it's a self-defense situation. And same in motorsport, anything can happen. If you ever shunt, yourself from being a mechanic, you're feeling pretty comfortable, and then I know for sure you've had that feeling when you've been sitting there, and then boom, you're feeling quite sort of, I don't know, not content, because you never can be, but
no, but you're absolutely right, and it comes back to what I was saying. It's this mental switching, isn't it, from being in a kind of semi-relaxed state or a comfortable state to all of a sudden being in an uncomfortable state, but you've got to be ready for that.
Yeah.
So you kind of got to be comfortable with that being uncomfortable.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's try and find a way of helping people, because if you were trained in that specifically through military, and I'm sure martial arts, does a lot of that to help a lot of that as well. How can we help people to understand, first of all, what that looks like? Mm-hmm. How do you go through a sort of mental shift from being in one state to another, almost voluntarily? It's one thing to say, you kick, your fight or flight response kicks in, and sometimes that's beyond your control. You can have prepared for it, but sometimes it just happens. It's a reaction. But sometimes we need to create that shift. We need to, make it happen for ourselves. If we want to change something in our lives, we need to instigate the shift. Mm-hmm. How can we do that? Guys, I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. If you can take a very quick moment to like, subscribe, follow, leave me a comment or a 5-star rating, I would really appreciate it. It makes a massive difference to the podcast.
Well, I think it's tougher than ever at the moment, because, for example, when I came down on the train here to meet you, I was looking around as I do. I'm very rarely on my phone when I'm traveling. And I just look around at people, and they're on their phones and their heads down. Everybody's in the same forward neck position, looking down at the phone. Yeah. And nobody's observing. People got headphones on. They don't know what's going on around. They probably think I'm the weirdo. But it's people are so distracted now. And I think you've got to find that, the mental toughness. It comes with discipline. Discipline is important. And it's like there's a great author called Stephen Pressfield. He wrote
I've heard of it.
What's it called? Gates of Fire, which is it's basically what 300 was inspired by.
Yeah.
And he wrote a fantastic book which you would like, actually, called The War of Art.
Okay.
And he talks about resistance in there. And that resistance it's like procrastination, basically. And we all do it. And I think it's harder than ever to be motivated, because you've got so many distractions. And I think that one of the key things is to take charge of it yourself. It's your choice.
Yeah.
We can all be there's the sheep, unfortunately, in life, and there's the shepherds, and there's the wolves, isn't there? And at the end of the day, you kind of, for me, I see myself as a bit of a shepherd, if you like. You have a bit of the wolf in you, but you've also got to have a bit of empathy with the sheep, if you like. And you've got to understand that people will kind of want to take themselves away from reality, especially when it's not good. And if you look at the world, obviously, as it is right now, we're probably in a little, not probably, for sure, we're in probably a big shift going through the whole of the world and the universe at the moment. It's just crazy, not the universe, but the world.
Yeah.
But that's up to us to change it. We can look at external things. So I would say that it comes down to daily habits. For example, get up in the morning, make sure that you have a breakfast in the morning. If you know you're not going to have any time later on, get up a wee bit early and do a wee bit of exercise, then set yourself up for the day. And I think especially for, obviously you got to be careful these days, but I think for men need that, because we need a release. Yeah. And I think that's really important. And a lot of guys are not doing that. And
well, just before we go on, then, how do you get out of bed? Because generally for a lot of people, they'll hear you say that and say, well, it's all very well saying let's get up, half an hour earlier, but it's that motivation. You need that somehow. You've got to create the motivation to actually drag yourself out of bed, haven't you?
Yeah.
Because you can say it the night before.
Sure.
You can have all the right intentions, and we've all been there.
Yeah.
It's when the alarm goes off, if it's an hour earlier than normal, it's very easy to hit snooze. So
sure.
Let's get to that step first. How can we help ourselves to actually drag ourselves out of bed? If that's what's going to help us to get to some goal, how do we drag ourselves out of the bed?
A big part of that is visualization. Even if it's in your own mind that you run the movie of like, okay, this is how I want to run my life from now on, and look at these little steps that you can do, because yourself, it's about steps.
Yeah.
And if you've got family, if you've got businesses, if you've got work, and like I say, maybe I'm being a bit unkind to people on trains and they're going to work every day, but they're probably doing something they don't want to do.
Yeah.
But then maybe even that's even more so as a goal to get out of that way of living, because who wants to live like that at the end of the day, really? Because like I said earlier, we're only here for a visit. So why not make the most of what we've got right here, right now? And I think either visualizing it mentally, like I said, in your head, visualizing it that way, or even but with a vision board of like set yourself some goals.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've done that in the past.
Something I find super helpful. Yeah.
It's brilliant, isn't it? I mean, it's a simple way of doing it. I think we were talking earlier before we came on the pod that, during COVID, we found different ways of adapting. It was adapt or die, wasn't it? Literally for some people. And even, we were tested. I remember being at a race in Morocco on the Sunday talking to Total Wolf about doing some great project coming up. And the next day COVID hit and boom, and that was it. I lost a whole lot, so I had to start again. So I had to dig deep inside myself and again, find that mental toughness, resilience, whatever you want to call it. But we found skills, didn't we? And I think even like the vision board thing was a big thing that I found during COVID. I thought really helped me to get out of the hole and look beyond what I was doing right now.
It was an amazing sort of social experiment, wasn't it? The whole pandemic. And what I found really interesting was exactly as you just said, it kickstarted a lot of people to dig deep, to find things that were always there in them, but they'd never really looked for or had to be forced to look for before.
Yeah.
But then I also found it really interesting that not for everybody, but in large parts, when the pandemic settled down and dissipated, we've kind of gone back to the old ways of doing things on a really large scale.
Yeah.
So keeping that motivation and keeping that same level when if the pandemic's gone and the really obvious motivator, which might have been that all your opportunities disappeared, there's a very obvious thing there to kickstart you into doing something different. If some of those opportunities come back and it might seem a little bit easier to go back to doing things the old way, why would you keep going? I mean, I know why. I get it.
Yeah.
Did you ever get Formula One drivers, for example, or racing drivers, athletes? Because on one hand, I think of them as they've got this very obvious motivation. They want to win. They want to become world champion or whatever. Did you ever find any of those that struggled to motivate themselves to get out of bed, to do the training, to dig as deep as you wanted them to go?
Not really, because I think they're all different. I mean, if you look, for example, DC and Montoya, so Juan Pablo historically didn't like exercise before. So I had to kind of make it fun for him. DC was a machine and I loved training him. He was like, it was a dream first driver in F1 to have, as far as a trainer is concerned.
Yeah.
because he loved training. You saw the benefit of it. It was a win-win all the way, right?
He was always open to new ideas as well, wasn't he?
Exactly. Yeah. He was. Every year, I always remember him saying, the start of a new season is the start of like a fresh page.
Yeah.
You know, and he wanted to reinvent himself. That was his words, you know, I want to reinvent myself this year. And that was great. And I loved that, you know, and that's and again, that's pretty much a little bit like what you're saying, Mark, isn't it? Is people have got an opportunity every day to reinvent themselves. Yeah. It's within every single one of our capabilities. You don't need money. You don't need riches. You don't need fame to do it. We can all do it, but it's self-discipline, and it's vision. It's having that vision. Like it's where you want to be.
So he obviously had that. The DC had a vision. You know, it doesn't sound like he needed a lot in terms of motivation. It was more the guidance in how you get to where you want to get to.
Yeah.
But, you know, let's take a Montoya who maybe doesn't enjoy the same things. You know, he's still got a motivation that he wants to become world champion. But I guess you've got to find a different path to get there. And that's where I'm coming from with this post-pandemic thing, where the original sort of goal or the original motivation, which was survival, you know, whether it's your career or genuinely in life, you know, survival, that sort of dissipated a bit. So now you've got to find a new way to get to wherever you want to get to. And for a lot of people, they didn't bother because there was an easier path now.
Sure.
So for someone like a Montoya, because maybe this is helpful, who knows where he wants to get to, doesn't want to do it maybe the traditional way. Yeah. How do you go about finding something that taps into his motivations and gets him on that path?
Yeah, I think, like, say, for example, with Juan Pablo, obviously he's Colombian. You liked having his family around. You liked having a lot of people around. I mean, you know, Juan wasn't a party guy. People might think that he was a party guy, but I don't know if you remember, but he didn't drink. No. You know, he never drank. He was quite quiet and not antisocial, but kind of like a bit like that. He wasn't really that comfortable in big groups or parties or anything like that. He wasn't his style. But what he liked is you had to find ways of making it fun for him, because he was kind of a wee bit like a kid, you know what I mean? Really, to be honest with you. So we got into cycling because you could buy bikes. He loved toys. You know, when he went to his place, and I was blessed to go to train him in Miami, which was great, and a few times. And he had this place, it was basically like a warehouse, and it was like Q Branch. There was everything there. There was boats, there was bikes, there was flipping motocross bikes, there was all sorts of stuff there, you know, to keep him motivated and keep it fun. So we did kayaking, we did cycling, but he paid a lot of attention to his diet, which he hadn't before. Yeah. And I think what the big thing is, obviously, again, going back to that as well, is how you get the message across to him. You have to read the room, don't you? Whatever I mean, you have to understand, as a coach or a person, if you're a leader in a business or if you've got people there, you've got to understand that everybody's different, haven't you? You know, they were polar opposites, weren't they? DC and Montoya. And so with Juan, he was paying attention to his diet because everybody had tried to force him to do it. So I kind of gave him made it like his idea. Yeah. And I said it to him, like, you know, when you rock up in Australia, let's treat it like you're a movie star, right? That when you rock up, you're like transformed, you know, and he lost, 7 kilos, and when he turned up, he looked in good condition. And so nobody could, because I said to him, the one thing that people can't say to you is that you're not a great driver. And he knew that. He was confident in his abilities, but they could say that he was overweight and he didn't like training, and go back to the old lazy comments because again, he was a controversial, like, he's a wee bit Marmite, isn't he? You know, Juan Pablo, you know, you either liked him or you didn't.
Did those things get to him? If people were saying those things, did it affect him then?
No, he didn't care. He really didn't care. And working with Kimmy as well, he was one of those characters. It was a different way of not caring. Yeah. I mean, they were both kind of rebels, weren't they, in their own way? His was a Latin,
it's basically explosion. Rob Dennis's nightmare driver lineup, wasn't it? Those two?
It was really, yeah. But for some reason, he could relate more with Kimmy. And I think Juan Pablo, I found he was a caged tiger. That was the way I would always describe him. He was like, I don't think. He's more an American than a European, let's put it that way. Yeah. He loves that big open space. He's like a lion or a tiger.
Well, it's funny you just said he was like a big kid, and from everything you just said there about the the making it fun for him, making it sound like his idea, getting it's using the psychology to flip it so that he feels like an element of control over what he's doing, as opposed to someone just telling him, right, here's a bowl of vegetables, eat this. It's kind of how we parent. And we're having all these challenges with kids as teenagers I've got at the moment. And it's the same thing, isn't it? And it's about, I mean, I've got twins. This is a great example. I've got twins, boy and a girl. They could not be more different from each other. And only really recently am I realizing that because they're completely different to each other, you have to treat them completely differently. There's no point rolling out the same set of rules or regulations or the same treatments for either of them, because they will respond very differently.
Yeah.
And it's totally the same in business, when you're managing teams, as it very much sounds like it is managing racing drivers. You've got to find something that works specifically for them if you're going to get the best out of them. And I think everybody listening to this has to do a little bit of self-analysis to understand what's going to work for them, because you can listen to as many gurus as you like. Yeah. It's not going to work for you unless it's the right message that sinks in and kickstarts that change that you're looking for.
No, exactly. And I think that's, again, going back to what we're saying about with the distractions. There's so much, there's so much procrastination. It's like there's no action taken because people are constantly comparing themselves. And as I say, comparison's the thief of joy, because nobody ever does anything. They just keep comparing. I'm not good enough. I'm not, because they have to be perfect. People feel like they have to be perfect. And there's no such thing as perfect. We've been in that world. We know the background, don't we, to everything. It's not, what you see on the surface is, and, it takes a lot to get there. And it's still not perfect, is it? And it never will be.
That's right. And especially with something like Formula One, which people tune in to watch, and they see this perfectly sort of manicured garage and elite machine. It is, we always used to call it the sort of swan on the water thing, wasn't it? Where above the waterline, it looks serene and beautiful. Underneath, it's flapping like crazy to make it all happen.
Exactly.
It's true, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's the same in any high performance environment, isn't it? Really, whether it's business or sport or military, whatever. Nothing happens in a straight line, does it? And that's the same with going back to, what you were asking earlier, Elvis, is with people just on a daily basis. I've gone back to teaching some circuit training classes with some people that I used to train 20, 30 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, because I've been doing this for 25 years, motor racing. And it's nice to go and train people who are not like, okay, they're not going to win world championships. But I want to help people, because there's a big problem in the world with obviously obesity, mental health. Yeah. Suicide rates is very high, especially for men, and I know that it's also for women as well, but for men particularly. And I think there's a lot of men out there that have lost their identity in society. Yeah. And I think, there's some hard times coming our way, whether we want them or not, and we are not in control of that. And I think that we've got to prepare ourselves mentally for that. And again, that goes back to the visualization. Okay, how can I make myself stronger physically, stronger mentally, stronger emotionally? Not, again, it's every culture, every generation is different. But I don't think there's any one, you couldn't say one generation is struggling more than another. I don't think. I think there's different challenges. It's just different challenges, yeah. And I think that it's our responsibility, or people who've gotten an opportunity to help young people. Now, I've got a 16-year-old son, and he's heading in the right direction because he's spent a bit of time with me, and I'm not forcing him to do anything, because again, I was given freedom to make my own choices when I was younger. I'm sure you find the same when it's having that balance, isn't it? Yeah. And with him, he's going the martial arts route, the coaching route, and he's got real good morals, and he's seen the world for what it is. And I think in his generation, there's some good people out there. There's some good young people coming through. Yeah. They've got the right morals. And if we, look at our leadership in the world, look for poor leadership. If we talk about leaders, I was watching Ron Dennis on an interview last night, funny enough, on YouTube, and you forget what a strong leader that guy was. Yeah. And we need people, not obviously exactly like Ron, but strong people who know their values, know their morals, and have got their true north. Yeah. And I think, but these young people coming through now, like I said to my son, you and your friends, you're the leaders. You got good morals, got good strengths as people, and you train, you look after yourselves. It's a bit of a throwback, and I think we've got to kind of throw ourselves back a wee bit away from the technology and just look at the pure human skills. And and we've all got the ability to do it. It's whether you want to swipe right or you want to swipe left, where you choose which way you go. It's
hard, isn't it? Because the world and the society is set up to encourage us to do more of that. Yeah. It's not to do less, it's to do more. Yeah. Every app on our phone now we can barely live without it because it runs our lives. So interesting that you just talked about there, this idea of more or less technology and focusing on technology versus focusing on the human, because Formula One's a big part of this, right? So Formula One, I always remember coming into Formula One where must have been 95% of the budget, all resources, all effort and focus was on the car. Yeah. It was building the fastest car. It was developing it. If you had any spare budget, you'd throw it all at trying to get another 1/10 of a second off your lap time. And there was almost no focus on the human side. I mean, obviously, yes, with the drivers, they had trainers that looked after them, they were athletes, but there's 1,000 people in a Formula One team without none of whom that car gets any better.
Yeah.
And it was only really, I guess, I mean, I noticed it with Dr. Aki Hintzer coming into McLaren in the mid-2000s. This shift began where and I think we were kind of leading this process at McLaren through him, this shift towards human performance being as important as technical performance, and the car. And I think in life, if we zoom out a little bit, life in general, we still haven't quite got that balance right. There's so much focus on technical development and, the wave of new technologies with AI and everything else is almost it feels like it's going to have more of an effect taking away from the human performance, giving more towards technology.
Yeah.
And therefore, if we fast forward the next few years, surely the benefit and the value in having human performance is only going to increase because it's going to become rarer.
Exactly.
So there's an opportunity there for the younger generation to maximize that, like you said with your son. That seems like a huge opportunity, but not only that, a necessity that we don't allow the human side of this performance metric to disappear.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think we're similar people, and I think we always have been. I remember over the years, our conversations when you were a mechanic at McLaren, and always remember us having conversations like this, and probably deeper now because we're older and we've got more life experience. I'm older than you, obviously, but we've got a lot of life experience under our belt now since those days. And we've seen, we've got kids and, the way they developed, and that helps develop you as a person too. But, there's people in the world that are empaths, and I think we're empaths. We see it in people. You kind of like say, we read the room, you understand. And I think that's, for example, my role it's easy to put you in in motorsport and in life, people put you in a box, physio, trainer, whatever, performance coach. But you're kind of like a lot of things, and maybe words that you can't even put or describe that, because I remember Arsene Wenger called it the invisible skills, things that people don't see on the surface. And, when I go into a team, for example, I stand at and I still do stand at the back of a garage, even when I'm within a team now, and I embed myself within a team to get to know them, because there's no point in me just going in as I don't know what you'd call it, but basically go in and just as a consultant and just have an overview, but you got to embed yourself within the group.
Well, it's like what I was just saying about the kids, isn't it?
You
need to understand, you need to know them all first and understand who you're working with before you can apply anything of any value to them.
Sure, exactly. And I think that, that's the thing is, I think people need to, like you said, zoom out when you were describing something else earlier on, but you got to zoom out and you got to make yourself zoom out sometimes. You got to force yourself to do it. And that's not easy, especially when you've got pressures, and there's a lot more pressures on people these days. And again, I go back to men, but it's, I'm a man, you're a man, we understand how men operate, and we're quite simple creatures, but we get easily confused, and the thing is, we've got to have that, regain that self-discipline where we do zoom out and go, okay, look, I need to be a better man, not better, but I need to look after myself a bit more physically, mentally, emotionally, so that I can be a better father, better husband, better person, human being in this world.
Yeah.
Because I think at the moment we're all getting zoomed in, lost in this technical world. It's dragging us in, and it's easy to do, and we all do it. And you have to. Sometimes I switch my apps off, just to give myself a little holiday away from it. Lockdown for some people was a holiday, wasn't it? I mean, it sounds disrespectful to the people who passed and that, but for some people they saw it as that because it was a nice break. They could spend more quality time with the family, but then they went back to their old habits. That's a bit like going away on holiday and thinking, if you just live for your holidays, that's not reality.
No,
you can take an internal holiday every day. In your mind, you can take yourself, you can meditate, and you don't have to be spiritual to do it. It's just a skill of learning how to control your breath.
Yeah.
And these tools are all out there. It's just not listening to every single person, because if you listen to every single person, and we all do it, that's why sometimes I have to switch my apps off, because I'm thinking, you're not doubting yourself, but there's kind of a bit of that, there where you're thinking, is he saying the right, but one minute that guy says do this, and this next minute this guy says do that, or lady says do this. And you kind of have to have that strength of mind and character to go, okay, this is where I want to go. And I can relate to this guy. It's like people listening to your podcast. There's people that are going to love listening to your podcast and they'll really relate to it. And there's some people that will listen to somebody else's podcast so they can really relate to. I've only got a few people that I listen to, obviously yourself, Mark. But I've only got a few people that I listen to, and could I make it that way? Because otherwise I'm going to be flipping lost in space otherwise.
It's too noisy, isn't it?
Oh, man, yeah.
I think one thing that I'd love to explore, because you've just touched on it there, is the idea of technology and apps and everything else that comes along with it. It's generally centered around making life easier for us. And I've got this whole dilemma in my mind that I don't think life should be easier.
No.
I think actually your growth, and if you're trying to get better at anything, the only way you do that is through going through some really tough times. And sometimes that happens just through circumstance. You can be, you can have a really difficult time thrust upon you, whether it's in early life or whatever. Generally, although that's really hard, often out the other side of that comes something way better, way stronger as a result. But even if you don't have some trauma inflicted on you, I believe that we should be pushing ourselves into this uncomfortableness and taking the harder route more often than not.
Yeah.
I mean, even like taking the stairs rather than the lift, taking the steps rather than the escalator. Stuff as simple as that. Making decisions all day when you're taking a harder choice, which no one does because the world is set up to make everything easier. If that is what's happening on a global scale, are we actually all growing as a society, or are we sort of shrinking into something that's no more productive and certainly no more valuable than we were, before all this technology came along?
I think I agree. I think we've devolved, and I think we need to, it's like the needle's just gone too far now. And okay, I know we've got AI and I don't know enough about it. I'm not a technical person. I'll be honest with you, I'm quite happy I'm not. I do the minimum I have to. But I think it comes back to, at the end of the day, we've all got the choice. That's what we've got to take a bit. It's courage. You need the courage to take a choice. I'm a big believer in the Stoic philosophies. So you've got courage, wisdom, justice, discipline, and those 4 pillars are really strong ways of life. I'm pretty sure you'd be into the Stoic way of thinking.
I think it's great guiding principles for life. Yeah.
And that was back in the day, wasn't it? And when that was when they had wars and plagues, and we're gonna it goes through full circle. And I think the one thing, Mark, I don't think enough people study history enough. And you don't have to be a bookworm to do it. It's all there. The information's there.
Yeah.
It's whether you choose to accept it or you choose to ignore it and think, well, that was in the past. But the past comes full circle.
I think it is fascinating, and I'm a big fan of the Stoic beliefs and some of the sort of scriptures and writings, because I think they're so relevant, even more relevant today than they were, 20 years ago, for example. But this idea of taking the easy path versus the difficult one is obviously something that's run through your life, because clearly in pushing yourself to become multiple black belt in martial arts, through going Royal Navy, but then seeking an even greater challenge. Those are difficult choices. You could have taken a way easier path, but it wouldn't have got you to here today, to where you are. And I'm sure the same when you're training a Formula One driver. There's a very easy route to sort of getting up every day. You could do a very light session. They don't lose their talent behind the wheel. They might put on a few pounds, but they might still be able to drive a car pretty quick. But when you're looking for that last 1%, which they all are, you've got to take the hard path, right? And so that's at an elite level for an athlete. To put this back into the perspective of people at home, there must be loads of people listening to this who want to achieve something, anything. It might be losing weight. It might be changing their body shape. It could be changing job. It might be in a relationship they're not happy with. It could be any number of things, but they want to make a change. The easy route is always going to be just carry on. Even though you're not enjoying it, you're not happy, just carry on the way you are. It's really quite simple to do. As I said, you've got technology that's going to help you. You don't have to make difficult choices, have difficult conversations. Or if you really want to get somewhere different, you've got to take a hard choice, right? So in all the experiences you've had where you've made those hard choices, what was it that made you at this fork in the road take the difficult one over the easy one?
I just don't feel comfortable I'm the opposite. I don't feel comfortable being too comfortable. I think if I'm that way, I feel like I'm in danger. That's it.
In danger of what? Not progressing in life, or? I
just feel like there's something that's missing. I just feel like is that saying in times of peace, prepare for war, isn't it?
Yeah.
And maybe that's a continuation of all the things I've done in my life. Where it's you feel that pressure and you feel like, okay, anything could happen at any minute, which every one of those things that I've done, it can do, because a fight could happen at any point. You know, a crash could happen at any point in motor racing. You got to be prepared, you know, for the outcome of that. And I think visualizing those tough times is really important, because people don't want to go to those dark places in their mind, do they?
No.
But we can all do it. We can all run that movie. And prepare by doing that, and even in, say, for example, martial arts, or, I mean, all those three things, like I said, the military run scenarios, Formula One, we ran scenarios, don't we? If you're, for example, if you're in the military and your weapon jammed, you train for that. If your gun doesn't work in the pit stops, you train for that.
Yeah.
If you end up in a horrible place in the street somewhere, you know, when I train people, especially women, I put them in an uncomfortable position, not straight away, but, you know, build that up, and then put them in an area where they, okay, maybe we're in a car park, it's dark, and then you have to, you know,
this is in self-defense training.
In self-defense training, because again, there's transfers everywhere, mate, and that's the thing, and people got to look at that and realize there is transfers into. That's why your podcast is great, because you've got different people from different walks of life. That everything's got Formula One experience, but the transfer into real life is there. But you've got to put yourself there.
So how do you do that?
Physically or mentally?
Well, how do you do it?
Or both?
How do you do it mentally? Because physically, a lot of the time, you can't put yourself there physically until that moment actually happens.
Yeah.
Whether it's in a race or whatever, it's difficult to often recreate the actual moment beforehand. But mentally, you can do it. But it's difficult. And again, for people at home, do you know what? I had a really good interview with David Goggins. You know, David Goggins, sort of ultra marathon elite athlete. You know, he's basically broken every record from a physical perspective you could ever do. Yeah. And he always says that one of his biggest strengths is visualizing the end goal before he's even begun. So visualizing him crossing the finish line, or visualizing him, you know, getting the certificate, even when he sat on his sofa and he was overweight as a young man. David Goggins, you wouldn't believe it now. But he could visualize, and every single day he visualized. So how do we do that? How do we actually visualize? Is it literally sitting in a dark room thinking about where you want to get to? And, you know, how can people practically take something about learning to visualize? Because it's not something that I guess comes naturally to everybody.
No, it's a skill. It's like anything. It's like meditation. You know, again, it's like everything, isn't it? Something's given a label, and automatically people think, and they'll try, okay, I tried meditation, I couldn't concentrate. Yeah, but that's part of it. That's the whole thing, isn't it? That's the challenge for your mind, isn't it? Because you will be distracted, but it's about ignoring those distractions, knowing they're there, not ignoring, but knowing they're there, but still continuing with your breath. And visualization is the same sort of thing. And it's a skill you have to practice.
So don't give up when it doesn't work first time.
Exactly.
You know, don't think, well, I can't do it.
No.
You couldn't walk when you were a kid. You
Exactly.
fell over every time you tried. But then you got back up and tried again.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I think people, it's like anything. If you're a spiritual person, you're willing to believe there's something out there. If you're not a spiritual person, you only believe what's right here in 3D in front of you, won't you? But it's the same sort of thing. Your mind is the hardest thing to, you know, and we all struggle. I still struggle with it day to day, you know, really. And it's like, my mind's like a fairground half the time. Do you know what I mean? Really, but so I have to find ways of dealing with it. You know, because I'm pretty sure I've got ADHD, because my youngest son's got ADHD, and when I'm spending time with him, I know that, you know, I get distracted with stuff, and I can easily go off at a tangent. So I have to focus on finding ways of doing that. And the meditation was a great thing for me. I found that through adversity. You know, when I was going through a divorce, I found, and I think, you know, let's go back and say to just normal life, if you like. You know, I've been through divorce. You've been divorced, yeah. You know, that's, and I'm sure people listening out there, many of them have been through divorces. It's tough times for everybody going through. That's not a nice time for you, your kids, especially for your kids, and how you feel about your kids if you're a good parent. And I think that, you know, you have to find ways of doing that. And when I went through it myself, and it was a nasty divorce, I had to find a way of dealing with it, and you can't do it all by yourself. That's the other thing. Don't think you can do every single thing by yourself. You recruit people to help you. Do you know what I mean? Whether it's your wife to say, listen, I'm going to try, I want to be a better dad. I want to be a better human being. I want to be happier. I want to feel energetic, you know, give my energy to you and the kids or whatever. I'm just giving an example. Can you help me? I think exercise is going to help me. I think if I change my lifestyle, the way I eat, because at the end of the day, we all want to be the best we can be, don't we? As parents, for example, right? If you're blessed enough to be a parent, then, or if you're not got children, you can be the best partner you can be, or just be the best human being you can be anyway. There's always a way. Everybody's got their own way of living. And I think there's always a way you can find it. And it might not be, there's external ways, of course, but you also got to look at yourself. And that's the hardest part. And I think looking at literally standing in front of the mirror, looking at yourself and positive self-talk.
Yeah.
And Andy, do you remember that thing when Andy Murray had I don't know where it was. He was, maybe it's French Open or something. I can't remember what it was. But look at that character. I mean, he's an extreme impressive character, isn't he, of a high performance level. But I remember once he was having a nightmare and he went to the toilet and he had a bathroom break. Went there and gave himself a right good talking to, came out and won the match. But we can all do that. None of us are going to be, there's only those guys, as you know, from working with Lewis and Alonso and all these guys, they're the 1%, aren't they? But if we can take just a smidgen of what they do, we don't compare yourself to Lewis Hamilton or Andy Murray or Alonso or whoever, Verstappen. That's the problem. Don't compare yourself to other people.
But even they don't do it on their own, do they? I mean, they all have people like you,
exactly.
Apart from, as well as other people in their circle as well. They, the strengths of those people, those guys, the Alonsos, the Hamiltons, and everyone else in this elite field is they know they can't do it by themselves. Even in an individual discipline, whether you're an athlete or whatever, it's not really individual because they've all got trainers, they've all got mind coaches. They've got people, a support network around them. And there is and in life, we all need that as well. So, I mean, what were from a Formula One perspective with the guys that you've worked with, was there generally an openness to, I mean, obviously the physical training had been around for years when you came to the sport, but a big part of what you've done is this mental sort of toughness preparation, getting people mentally prepared for these big moments. Was there an openness from most of these guys to that?
Yeah, there was actually. I mean, again, maybe I just felt lucky with it. I don't know. But I think if you get the message across in the right way, if you're not just feel like they've been punished, do you know what I mean? And there's a point to it. There's a point to, and that's why I like working with young drivers as well, because you can start to get the habits in early. Yeah. You can build up. It's a bit like our kids, like you said, it's like bringing a kid up. It's the same sort of thing. You build instill in these guys, and quite a few of the guys that I trained when they were young drivers are established in their 30s now and stuff, and they're still going strong. Because I'm not saying it's just down to me, but they've got good families or whatever as well. But again, it's help from other people. It's people instilling good morals, good habits, good standards. Even in the gym, the boys will laugh even now. Alex Lynn sent me a picture a couple of weeks ago after he got out of the car. I can't remember, it was at Austin because it was boiling. Yeah. And he was actually sat on the car and he said, sorry for me sitting on the car, Gerry, but because I had to let anybody sitting down in between exercises. And again, the message to them is, well, it's because you're telling yourself, most importantly, that you're tired. Yeah. And you're showing me that you're tired. So that could be your opposition that is showing you they're tired. So it's, again, that comes from, military, martial arts, whatever. That's the influence there. So you can have a little pieces of...
Well, it's mental toughness, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's you can take the easy option, sit down, even if it's only for a minute.
Yeah.
Or you can take the mentally tough option, which is difficult and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But will have the benefits both mentally, but also physically, because your body's not, being told it's time to relax by sitting down. So all of these little things, and this is that 1% that you're on about, isn't it? It's the final little bit. It's these little elements. We keep talking about this. We say mental toughness all the time. We've brought it up a few times in this conversation. What's your view on, as a world in general, not just elite athletes, but this idea that I personally feel that mental toughness is something that's sort of ebbing away a little bit in the world. And I can't help but feel that that's going to be a negative for us as a race, as a population. We need to maintain, and then there's a whole dilemma, isn't there, about being politically correct and being, not sort of toxic, mentally toxic to people. But there's got to be some real balance and fine line somewhere between going too far the other way, where we're so nice and gentle to everybody that no one really gets the message they actually need to hear if they want to improve. No,
I agree totally. And I think even the expression mental toughness is, people will replace it with resilience, which is a good word. But don't be scared of the word. It's only a word. Do you know what I mean? And everybody will find it in different ways. And maybe if somebody had a bad episode when they were younger and toughness scared them, maybe, I don't know. But again, it goes back to finding ways of working with people. But you can you can develop this mental toughness in a different way. Everybody's got the barometer, haven't they, of how much discomfort they can take. But we can all push ourselves just a wee bit more, can't we? That's within all of us.
And that's where it starts.
That's where it starts. But you've got to be willing to put yourself in that place, to whether it's turning on the cold tap in the shower to start with. Small things, I mean, that's the thing, they call it atomic habits, don't they? Just small things.
Yeah.
A cold shower, when you're feeling really nice and warm under that shower, but then you think, okay, for just maybe 10 seconds to start with, just get that cold on you and feel that discomfort and take yourself to that place. And you'll feel, it's almost like a primal feeling. And I think we've lost that primal feeling. I think I'll be honest with you, I think especially in the UK and Europe, maybe the Western world, generally speaking, you go to other places in the world and there's still that element of toughness there, the survival, because they've had hard times and they've had to adapt. For example, even, no, it's not political, it's just a fact, with the Ukraine situation, you saw when Russia invaded Ukraine. And look what they did. There was women helping guys put weapons together. If that happened here, I don't think it would. I think if you gave them a subscription for Netflix for a year, they'd be quite happy. Do you know what I mean, really? But
we've been conditioned, haven't we, to expect a comfortable, relatively easy life. I'm a total believer that is hampering us as a nation, not just a nation, but as a sort of particularly probably a Western race, as you say.
Yeah.
Look, let's bring this towards the end. But what I want to do is kind of run through a little bit of a sort of case study, if you like, for somebody who's sitting at home who wants to change, who's not happy with the way they are in life, whether it's, through their own sort of health and fitness, whether it's, as I said earlier, they're not in a job they enjoy or a career they like or a relationship or whatever it might be. They want to make a change based on everything you've learned through, your kind of conditioning through the military, your martial arts training, and especially working with elite athletes in Formula One who need to get to a goal. And they're in amongst other elite athletes. So they've got to find a way to step up and be, in that 1%. If you want to win, you've got to be in the top 1%. So if somebody's sitting at home watching, they know, let's say they want to get fit. They feel like they're overweight. They're uncomfortable with the way they feel and look. What are the first steps we can go through to give them some way of, finding some motivation, finding a way to dig deep, and then taking those first small steps to create a habit that might get them on the journey. Not the whole process, but getting them moving, because that's the most difficult bit. It's the hardest bit and probably the most important bit.
Sure. Well, I think going back to the like, say, for example, the Montoya analogy or scenario at the time, if you find something that you enjoy, that's a good thing. That's a good first step. If you can find something you enjoy. I mean, some people maybe never exercised in their life, but maybe sometimes it's a trial and error thing.
So some people will be terrified at the thought of going for a run, for example, right? So find something different. So
exactly.
Experiment.
And don't think, even if you're, for example, the people I've got on my circuit training class, they're all in their 50s now. Most of the guys that are in that class now. And that's 25 years ago that I trained them. So they're 25 years older. They're not as conditioned as they were. But they found the courage to step in and I'm going to be easy with them, building it up, So, and I think that's the thing. Maybe find a coach, like say, if you can't do it by yourself, get yourself a personal trainer. There's millions of them in the world nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, when I started, I was one of the first in the country. Never mind then in the 90s, early 90s. But now there's thousands out there, millions out there. You can find them. Again, going back to the help thing. Get help of an expert. Hopefully it's somebody recommended, because that's probably the best option. Because again, there's so much choice out there. You have so much choice, you probably end up doing nothing.
Or even a friend, right? Doing it with a friend.
Exactly.
Having a little bit of accountability with someone else. If you phone someone up and says, right, we're going out tomorrow on the bike or whatever. Yeah. Once you've told someone else, you're much more likely to get up and do it than if you just told yourself, because then there's an easy out. Exactly. Right. So maybe doubling up with someone else. Exactly. And maybe train for an event. Some people like to train for a marathon, or if you've never trained as friends in your life, but you think start small, maybe train for a 5K run, or if you want to run, or a shorter cycle, or a mini triathlon, and just do it from there. Do something that's not going to be like, you're not climbing Everest. Straight away. You're actually, don't make the goal too daunting at first. Right? Yeah, exactly. So getting off the sofa is literally the first step. We can all do that. Yeah. So make that your first target. Exactly. And then and understand that it's going to be tough, and there's going to be resistance from yourself, never mind anybody else. So you've got to, again, visualize that resistance and give yourself a good talking to every day, saying, okay, I didn't feel like, you're not going to feel like doing it. But once you put on your trainers, or none of us are as fit as we used to be.
You know, I mean, it's like, and you know, your mind writes checks your body can't cash, to use an old term, isn't it? Because you think you can still do it. I mean, I've sometimes I have dreams of like I'm doing an assault course, or I'm doing, you know, I'm doing a 1,000 kick test or something like that, but I probably couldn't do it now, or it'd be harder for me to do it now. Do you know what I mean? Than it was back in the day.
Yeah.
But that's just life, and so don't compare yourself to other people. Just take it step by step, day by day. But be strong and use your mental toughness to keep you going, because it's just one foot in front of the other, and before you know it, you're rolling.
Yeah, and the visualization and the giving yourself a talking to, as you said there, in reality, what does that look like? Are you literally standing in front of a mirror, speaking out loud at yourself, telling yourself what you need to do or what you want to do? Does that work? That can work for people, right?
Yeah, it can do. Yeah, I mean, I've done it. You know, mad as it is, I've done it, and I've done it in my car. You know, I'm sure we've all, you know.
We do it 1,000 times a day in our head,
exactly,
don't we? So what's the difference?
Exactly, mate. Exactly. And your mind doesn't know what's real and what's not real. Do you know what I mean, when you do that visualize, that's how powerful it is. They've done experiments with people, haven't they? With testing people, when the ones who visualized, the ones who did it and practically, and the ones who did both.
Yeah.
And the ones who did both were extremely strong.
Yeah, there's a lot of science behind it, you know, in terms of it being really helpful. So yeah, if you're sitting there at home and you want to, you know, let's say get fit, first of all, find the thing that you're going to find easiest to do, which will be the thing you enjoy most. So experiment with a bunch of different exercises, and it can be so simple. If you're going for a walk, it doesn't have to be real hard exercises at first. It's getting off the sofa first. Find maybe someone to help you if that's what you need, a friend or a professional, and then go through this process of visualizing. And for me, I do this a lot, right? The visualizing for me is a bit like what I said with David Goggins. It's visualizing where you want to get to. And what I always what helps me is trying to work back from that moment. So if I think of a person in the future who looks the way I want to look, who feels the way I want to feel, who can achieve the physical things that I want to achieve, and then if you visualize that person, and it's you, but visualize it in as much detail as you can, and then work back from that and think, right, well, right now, today, what would that guy be doing?
Yeah.
You know, if that guy is running a marathon or whatever, what would he be doing right now? He wouldn't be sitting on the sofa.
No, exactly.
You know what I mean? And I find that really useful to sort of work back from where you think you want to get to, and then try and put yourself in the mindset or the picture of that person that's in your mind's eye.
No, and that's a great way of doing it. That's a great strategy, mate. And I think as well, and understand that you don't get there easy. You know, nobody woke up the next morning and was an Adonis. You know what I mean? Like it takes a lot of hard work to chip away at the sculpture, doesn't it? Really, you know what I mean? The marble, and create that sculpture. And you know, you might not. You don't necessarily have to have a 6-pack. You don't have to, you know, because to get to that level is tough, especially as you get older, isn't it? So even if you had one when you were younger, when you're older, it's tougher. And it's just, I mean, it might be something as simple as I want to be able to play with my kids.
Yeah.
You know, I see plenty of parents that I don't think they'll be playing with their kids, to be honest with you. And I'm not sure that when their kids are older, they're going to be playing much either, to be honest with you. Because at the end of the day, you're a role model for your children.
Totally.
And, you know, I'm sure your kids see you going out for a run and everything, and they're like, okay, that's your example, isn't it? If your example is sitting there watching Netflix and, you know, again, the flip side of lockdown was Deliveroo, all these things, you know, that came to your door at the touch of a button. That's the flip side of it, you know.
It became too easy and too comfortable.
Yeah.
But you're right. You're breaking generational patterns by changing yourself.
Yeah.
Because your kids will then see that is to say their role model. The other little details that I would add in from my own personal thing that helped me is, and a lot of people say this, but if you are struggling, you know, to literally get out the door for your exercise, make it as easy as possible. So, you know, put your running kit next to the bed so you trip over it when you get out. You know, put the alarm clock on the other side of the room so you've literally got to get out of bed to go and turn it off. And simple little things like that can just knock down each of these tiny little hurdles that are so easy for you to go, that's right, I don't need to do it, you know, or I'll start tomorrow. If you've had to get out of bed because your alarm clock's over there, you're already halfway there. You might as well now put your trainers on. And these little tiny details on a practical level can really help. But I think that the mental side is delving into the toughness and telling yourself, preparing yourself is not going to be easy. Mm-hmm. I'm sure with Formula One drivers, you have to do the same thing. This idea of a beginning of a season, they've got to get to the end of the season still in good shape. Today we're in a 24 race season, traveling across multiple time zones, a really grueling schedule. There's nothing easy about that. So as long as you know that it's not going to be easy, if you haven't kidded yourself that it is going to be, you at least be mentally prepared for it. And that's huge. That's surely a huge part of this, not being surprised when it is tough.
Exactly. You almost you've got to embrace it. Embrace the toughness. It's a test that's only going to make you a better person.
Yeah.
Whether you're going to win a championship or whether you're going to be a good role model for your kids and you're able to play football in the garden with your son or your daughter. If it doesn't, whatever your goal is, it's achievable. It's just, again, it is totally a mindset thing, but it takes more than ever nowadays, tremendous self-discipline and mental toughness. And like you said, mate, we're going to need that, and we're going to need it because hard times are coming. And let's not swipe right and pretend it's not happening. It is happening, and we've got to dig deep inside ourselves.
So true, and a great way to end it. I mean, Gerry, you literally modeled this stuff yourself. You've been a role model for so many people, elite athletes, but I think way more than that. And I can tell you, and you may have never been told this, but in the team, we all looked up to you because you literally embodied toughness, physical and mental. And I think when we were going through, particularly from a pit stop crew and the team itself, going through this transition, as I said earlier, towards human performance being a major factor, it was you and the people around you that definitely inspired me to want to kick on and go down this hard route. I also now wake up and enjoy pushing myself to uncomfortableness. And a large part of this is because of people like you doing it working with us. So
that's nice to hear.
Yeah, and you're still doing it, mate. Your background is unbelievably difficult. You've had an incredibly difficult path through life, but most of it is one you've chosen yourself. You've literally chosen the tougher route. And look, I hope I'm right in saying that you seem very happy in life in general. Yeah. You said earlier, you may not be the richest guy in the world, but you're pretty happy. You're in a pretty content place. I know that you're in great physical shape and you're still helping an awful lot of people in motorsport and beyond. And that's got to go down as a pretty successful time, eh?
No, I appreciate that, mate. Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, pleasure, mate. Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that one. I absolutely loved it. I could talk to Gerry for hours and hours. There are subjects we never even covered that I really want to, so maybe there's a part 2 in there somewhere. I hope you're able to put some of his practical tips and advice into practice because they might just help you get closer to the high performance that you're after in life. Anyway, until we speak again, try and remember this. Do the right things, do the things right.